Mike Leecy, I'm like I stated earlier, wildlife range and ag manager for Warm Springs. My backdrop is, I've only been in this position for a year, but prior to that, I had 29 years in with forestry for our tribe. And one interaction that kind of comes to mind is one with the black bear. I had my dog with me, and we're doing some timber sale layout. And my dog, you're sucking the brush like 100 feet down the hill, was tearing after it. I'm like, huh, I wonder what that is. I hear something scurry up the tree. And next thing you know, I hear the brush moving, like with the dog. And it's coming up the hill at me. And my dog pops out of the brush, but the sound's still down there and it's still coming up the hill at me. And the dog's looking up at me like, hey, Dad, I'm bringing it to you. So we put it out there. I didn't see the bear. I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what. Get us into trouble.
Yeah.
He came back pretty good.
Yeah. He's a little bit faster than me though. Yeah.
My name is Max Oaks. I'm a wildlife biologist for the tribe, also an enrolled member, working in natural resources on and off for 8 years, in wildlife for the last 3. I guess an interesting anecdote, I started out my career doing, like a lot of folks do, a lot of riparian fencing. So that was always fun, but there was this one specific riparian fence we were working on in the Beaver Creek drainage. And it's pretty rocky terrain, and you hear this loud, it sounds like tumbling coming down the hill. Assuming it's rocks, it's okay, we're looking up the hill, we're watching out. And before you know it, this maybe 1-year-old Tom comes bowling down through out of this brush and dives between 2 of our fence lines that we had just put in, just like right through, and just like took off, past us, and thankfully he didn't run into anybody, but it's on a tear, So it was just like something that, definitely hadn't experienced before.
What was it? A 1-year-old what?
Black. Yeah.
Oh,
Next slide. So, yeah, we work for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. There was also members of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. It's that purple, larger contiguous border, just, comes right along the edge of the Cascades there. That's the Warm Springs Reservation. So that's where we work, that's where we live. The rest of the area, the rest of that red boundary, that was the area that was ceded to the U.S. federal government as part of the treaty with the tribes and bands in Middle Oregon in 1855. And in ceding that, we secured to ourselves our what we call our treaty right. So the right to hunt, fish, and gather medicines, foods, materials, and open and unclaimed lands within that, and also within any usual and custom stations, which are other areas that were not within this boundary, but are tied to our ancestral territories, ancestral places that we used to be. We are Ishiwana people, which means that we come from the Big River, Ishiwana, the Columbia River, just to the south of us. And so, that's kind of a backdrop of where we work, where we play, but it's also, go to the next slide, kind of a driver of what we do. So turn it over to Mike a little bit to talk maybe about some of the significance of carnivores to look at and predators, but also just what we view as other relationships on the landscapes toward people that we share the landscape.
So his first bullet point up there is the creation stories. That ties us to the landscape. One thing that I heard growing up with my grandparents, I was growing up, I was raised fairly traditional. We hunted, we fished, we picked berries, we dug roots. We did this as a family unit. But one thing that was taught was that a long time ago, the animals and us, we all spoke and we all communicated together, and throughout time we lost that. And through those teachings and through those seasons, it taught us the seasonality of things. Like, for instance, in the spring, we did a lot of root digging, we did fishing. As we got into summer, it rolled into more berry picking, and transition into fall was hunting and woodcutting. And in the winter, we kind of enjoyed the fruits of our labor. It helped us to sustain ourselves through the winter. And we picked up that seasonality back up in the spring. And in doing those things, it reminds us the importance and the connection to land and like our deer people, when we harvest a deer, it's something that should not be taken lightly because the animal is there and its purpose is to sustain us, and we are there, in part to take care of the deer as well. And as it says that we are now surrogates of the voiceless, so we speak for those things that can't speak for themselves.
Yeah, so it kind of ties into also like the concept of seven deprivations that, you know, when we talk about, there's no word in any of the Sahakan or Shinnecock people's languages that defines conservation or explicitly says conservation, and there's always an inherent trait of all of the teachings that we were taught. It's always something that we understood. We take care of the land because it takes care of you, vice versa. That's the cycle of life, that balance that we always try to, I guess, you know, interact with the world around us with. So, you know, that was how we lived on the landscape since time immemorial. Obviously, that changed drastically after contact and signing the treaties, which put us into neat little boxes and also removed a lot of that connection to the landscape, and obviously shifted how a lot of the landscape was managed or interacted with, which, you know, we talk about now where these shifts from previous disturbance regimes, lots of cultural fire regimes are, you know, one of the, you know, it's never a good thing. Severe wildfire, one of the cool things that came out of some of the fires going on, like the big fire, the fire just east of the river, was some of the archaeologists working on it were able to tease out that there was, you know, significant evidence of a cultural fire regime here that was much more frequent than obviously previously acknowledged by Western science. Say that, so that's something that's, you know, starting to realize now. It's a lot of what we're doing is trying to make up for whoopsies over the last 200 years, you know, very rapidly. But one of the, you know, positives of that is, like, you know, we can get ourselves into these situations and also get ourselves up. So moving on from that, we can go to the next slide. So talking a little bit about, again, some of the significance of those relationships. Obviously, these were in our creation stories, these were the relationships that gave up themselves and often lost their ability to speak, or we lost our ability to understand them as a result of, you know, their need to take care of us as the last creatures to touch down on the landscape in our creation stories. So next slide. That's also a big factor now why we do some of these things. So this is a meadow that's in some of our it's in our Log Springs area. It's not directly in some of that oak landscape, but it's pretty much adjacent to. And what you can see, obviously, you know, enjoying this meadow is a nice elk there, but also in the foreground you have those purple flowers. So that's campus, that's water. So this meadow is not only supporting the life history of elk and other species, including now cattle and livestock, but it's also a gathering place for families go to, you know, not only do that fruit first interactions that we do with the landscape, but also to, you know, sustain and nourish themselves into the later seasons. Walking was one of the last fruits that's gathered. It's typically gathered in August, prepared, it's baked in underground ovens into September. That's, you know, again, one of the last foods.
And they do that right at the site.
Yeah. Yes. And this is, you know, we're hoping to actually start doing some fire again in some of these meadows, restoring some of that loss of fire that's been gone for decades in some instances, 20+ years in some instances, which is a drastic shift from that more frequent, anywhere from 5 to 15-year fire intervals that used to be there. So we're trying to restore some of these beneficial things that have been lost to the landscape, and in some of the actions, just because it benefits everything. Go figure, everything's connected, right? So restoring water connectivities to a lot of our streams that are providing, you know, that cold water refugia for fish, which is another important species for us culturally, but also, again, some of the plants and animals that we also depend on. So we can go to the next slide. So on the wildlife side, before 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act, that's what directed us to be a federally recognized tribe. We had to have an elected tribal council. Before we had a tribal council, which is a concept that was actually brought west with their interaction with East Coast tribes. We had different leadership groups, and one of those groups was our Fish and Wildlife. It became our Fish and Wildlife Committee. So they're one of the oldest committees that we have as a people. And it's also they work tirelessly to start creating some of the laws set down on paper that we utilize in order to not only, regulate our hunting, but also to ensure we're doing the work, on behalf of those species the best way that we can. So since time immemorial, the various tribes and bands of Indians, now confederated as the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon, held Indian title to and right of occupancy based upon aboriginal possession of certain land along the Columbia River and its tributaries. Since time immemorial, these areas have been historic, usual, and accustomed hunting places of the members of said tribes and bands of the members of the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation since its organization pursuant to the provisions of the tribes of Denton, Middle United States, at Wasco in Oregon, just about 30 minutes to the southwest territory on June 25th, 1855, which treaty set apart the Warm Springs Reservation for our people's use forever and reserved the exclusive right to hunt on the reservation and gather and fish, and guaranteed to our people the right to hunt on unclaimed land in common with the citizens of the United States. These hunting rights and the wildlife resources on which they depend constitute an invaluable and irreplaceable asset to the members of the Confederated tribes. They form an important cultural and historic and economic asset of the tribe and its members. The tribal council, in order to protect and preserve the tribal property for the benefit of tribal members, both in the present and future generations, and in the exercise of its sovereign powers, find it necessary to regulate and control all hunting on the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon, and to exercise their treaty reserved hunting rights by tribal members off the reservation. So this was, again, something that was founded just after tribal council was formed in 1934. So it's been an operating doctrine that we've been working off of since then, and it's something that we are also working to modernize as technologies change. So it continues to work on our behalf into the future. So we can go to the next slide. This is just a little bit of a better map showing the reservation. Proper, the eastern boundary is formed by the Deschutes River, the southern boundary is formed by the Metolius River, just right below where the Crooked River, Deschutes, and Metolius come together. And then the western boundary is formed by the Cascades. Next slide. You might want to mute it. It's a lot of helicopter audio, so yeah, but we can play this. So, you know, one of the important things to ensure we have this wildlife resources for the people available is ensuring we understand what the population is doing. So part of what we do, showing there's a lot going on in this photo. We were actually doing some sheep counts, and we ran into a banded elk that pushed up the hill, that also ran into a few mule deer, and then we were pretty close to a small band of horses. So it's just kind of in the mud now. It's actually not too far from some of our, you know, some of the draws and that are actually predominantly oak. So we pushed the sheep out of some of that oak scrub up into this. So it was fun trying to make sure we got all of that. So I also had some video to make sure we didn't miss anything. But you know, this is the big driver of what we do. We want to ensure we have those resources there for the people to exercise those treaty rights. If you don't have that there, they can't exercise their treaty rights. You know, that's not beneficial for the people. We can go to the next slide. And so this circle just kind of shows a lot of where that oak habitat lies on the landscape for Warm Springs. It's also, and in a couple slides, I'll have showing the fit as well for the ECOP, but we can go to the next slide. So this is some of the range that we have cruised as part of our forestry, showing some of the extent of oak on the Warm Springs Reservation. This isn't, you know, everything that's oak on the landscape. A lot of that has changed since these initial cruises were done for some of that, those oak stands. Go to the next one. And this is kind of breaking out between two separate areas, between like the central northern portion of the reservation, what we call the Long Creek area. It's kind of formed by Highway 9, 26, and 126, creates this kind of triangle area. And then to the northeastern boundary, the Mutt Mountains, aptly named. It's also like a huge significant portion of oak landscape there as well. So we can go to the next. This is also overlaying, again, to kind of show in the soft, you can't really see it here, but the softer green that's shown in the fifth. And then, you know, considering where some of that oak was in the previous photos, we're showing some of our critical summer and winter range for mule deer that we've shown from some of our mule deer following data. You see the connection and the significance of oak landscaping and supporting that, you know, on the landscape. So, you know, preserving oak and ensuring it's as resilient as it can be is an important facet of making sure we have these wildlife resources to take care of and take care of us. the only place. Tying it back to carnivores, so since the reintroduction in the nineties in Idaho, with the first, the slow movement of wolves westward, and eventually into Oregon, we got our first signs roughly of migratory wolves pushing through the reservation in probably the early 2010s, but we had our first official confirmed wolves start really popping up on the reservation, our first den pack in 2018. And then just that also creates a lot of conflict, and I do have some videos that I can pull up.
Yeah.
Creates a lot of conflict between the different predators we have on the landscape. So we had one video I wanted to show at least where we had just some interspecies conflict over research. Yeah, so this is so that was a hit carcass off of the highway, and this is, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wolves against one bear. Yeah, this one bear, so he's kind of standing his ground, which is something that you would think of, like you have a full pack of wolves, and he didn't. Yeah.
What's the carcass then?
That's a horse carcass that was hit. Yeah. So yeah, we try to, just because 26 is such a huge fragmented area, it's almost directly through the center of the reservation. We try to remove any of those hit animals further enough out to again pull them away from the highway and also pull them away from other livestock or other grazers. So we're not creating outside of this conflict, we're not creating conflict with grazers. And we have, this is the other pack on the reservation. There's several black wolves in there. That's a genetic trait that actually came from the dogs at some point in the evolutionary line. So it's not a typical color you would actually see on the predators. So that's.
Max, can you share a little bit about, or Mike, about, like hunting practices of carnivores? Is that something that was historically practiced by indigenous people, and is it continued today, or is there a different approach?
So the way I look at it is, carnivores were, we grew up together, evolved together. And I feel like our ancestors learned a lot of their hunting techniques from carnivores, like tracking, stalking, and probably we should forget either that we're a predatory animal. We're actually probably the most influential predator out there. So yeah.
There are tribal members who do hunt for those. Mountain lion, not as a food source. Some folks do eat black bear, so it does happen. Wolf hunting is not allowed on the reservation; it's still illegal.
Yeah.
East Cascades. So